One. And we are recording on Friday, November 7th, 2025 at 1:09 p.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Stephen Murray, Mr. Ian Burlingame. We've both been on here before. I think you guys have been on here together once. You guys can go to the description, find the links to their Twitters, all that good shit. And yeah, underwear guns and feeling like I'm hungover even though I don't drink anymore. So, and then EM, of course, with a very nice compliment of saying he runs into Steve in the worst places like this show. And I'll end the fucking I don't getting being nice to like guests and people in the comment section has gotten me nowhere. So I'm at a point now where I'm just like, I'll just turn off the fucking show. I don't care anymore. So on that cheery note, gentlemen, what's going on?
Oh, what isn't going on? I mean, oh yeah, we should start with the AI bubble, and I can't think of the guy that just shorted it for $1 billion. What's his name?
Yeah, I know. I don't remember his name. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
Was that the big
Yeah,
short guy that did it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
yeah.
were saying that, yeah.
Well, then the
Yeah.
very next day, Sam Altman came out and said that, they basically need a backstop for uh, Chat GPT as
How about
OpenAI.
go fuck yourself in the mouth? Fuck that guy.
Well, what it proves is that again, this is the problem that I think most people are starting to realize is they don't know how to monetize AI yet, right? And that's the bubble
Well,
is going to burst. Go
it's
ahead,
not
Mark.
monetization. We don't have AI, first off, so we're not going to get the productivity gains out of it, right? That was, you know,
You
what
know,
were
after
the
doing two shows with you, I should have realized by now that you were going to say that and anticipated it. But
right? Well,
yeah.
and we don't have, well, they got better tech than us. Yeah, no, sorry. I've been in both private sector and government. They don't. Um, Give me a second.
Yeah.
There were three escape vectors that we have been counting on since the 1960s. One was that we were all going to upload into the computer and therefore escape, earthly needs and requirements and productivity requirements, all of that. We were going to upload into the singularity. Well, that didn't happen. It's not going to happen for the very same reason that we don't have and aren't going to have AI, and that is because artificial um, or non-organic computation is not thermodynamically or electrically, laws of conservation of energy sustainable. You can't compete with organics for computation, thermodynamically balanced, energetically balanced computation. So singularity is off the table. I'll come back to that in a second, though, because it happened, but it happened in reverse. The machine came to us. We didn't go into the machine. The other one was that AI was going to give us 100,000x productivity gains so that, we were going to have this vast improvement per energy unit input that would dramatically lower costs. Well, that's not true either because AI isn't even remotely, a 3-year-old child doesn't have the linguistic or verbal skills or the information access skills yet, but can outthink all computational computing power on Earth combined. The third one was that we were all of these things combined, right? The third one was that we were going to be a space-based race, but that's not really possible either because it turns out every one of the 100 trillion cells or so in your body require Earth's gravity and Earth's electromagnetic field to even function properly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, okay, those were the three escape vectors that we've been investing trillions of dollars in, and vast amount, the vast majority of the smartest people have all gone into basically those three domains in finance as a way to try and, you know, not deal with or address the human nature related things because we were all going to be able to escape. Well, it's turning out just on thermodynamics principles alone, none of this stuff is possible. And so we're going to have to, and so what did they, and we realized this quite frankly, somewhere around 20 years ago, 20, 25 years ago, we started to realize this. And everything we've been doing since to the tune of several trillion dollars a year invested has been in creating the illusion of these things. and we can't sustain that anymore. Yeah, go ahead, Tommy.
No, just a quick thought. Last year, I think, I read a book called Empires of the Sky. It's a fantastic book. It's all about Graf von Zeppelin and the development of the Zeppelin
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how it was just, it was the destabilizing force. It was like, dude, what is this shit? We can just fly in other countries. And they put so much time into it
yeah,
because it was the way they described it was just kind of fascinating when you think about how we just accept flight. They were like, it's an immense ocean that touches every piece of Earth, and you can take off and just go swim in it somewhere else. And then obviously the projection of military power. And they put so much into this. We put a lot into it as well. The US, Germany was kind of the real mover. Um, and you could say at the end of it, like that was an escape vector. And then we found out it was kind of horseshit. But a lot of the development and a lot of the race also then kind of bled over into heavier than aircraft. So it wasn't all for naught. Now, I'm not
yes,
defending or
yeah,
shitting on AI. I don't care.
yeah,
But you almost wonder if there is the idea itself of flight, it became something else,
yeah,
and you kind of had to exhaust all the other options first. You
Well,
almost wonder if there's something
totally
safer.
agree.
they
Yeah,
figured out there's vulnerabilities, right? It's like heavier in aircraft, right? You have the flight envelope, and they figured out that the flight envelope of a blimp is just one, it's too slow, doesn't have the speed. It can have the duration, the endurance. I saw plans for blimps, cargo carrying blimps
Hmm.
into the 90s that they had this massive, three mile long cargo carrying blimp with jets and the whole nine yards. Always comes back to the same principle. They can't they can't deal with heavy weather. They can't deal with heavy winds. So, the vulnerabilities. And as we go through this check, the tech, we figure out where the vulnerabilities are. I mean, Elon's taken rocket technology probably to the edge of its capability. And just what he's done with heavy lift. Like we used to build rockets, literally we'd build them on the pad and we couldn't tell you if it was going to be successful or not. And the engine technology
Yeah.
was complex I'm serious. I
No,
mean,
I know. I've read a
I've
zillion of these books.
oh, I've literally been on the launch, in the launch control center and watched them blow up Deltas and Titans and the whole nine yards as they went off axis, right? Because they did all these calibration tests and everything looks green. Then they hit the, turn the keys and away it goes and it goes off axis and they got to blow it up. And, there's 10 satellites in there that are worth, $1.6 trillion. It gets very
oh yeah,
expensive, right?
yeah,
I think Elon he's made space safer. He's made lift a hell of a lot more efficient. But here's the problem we have with space. One, the body atrophies to the point where we can't function when we come back to gravity. And two, our issue is not how much stuff we take, it's how much water we take, right? Because we're water-based beings, so we have to have water to survive. And you can survive without food for an extended period of time, but you can't survive without water. And water is really heavy to lift. And
yeah.
most importantly, it's very unstable when it's moving around.
Water
So,
we can deal with because we have filtration capability. The primary issue, and for people, I look at Dr. Dennis Noble's work. He's in his late 80s now, I think, out of Oxford. But he did a great book called Understanding. I'll have to send the link later. I can't remember Understanding Biology, whatever. But what he did is he spent 60 years going against the grain of that life's biomolecular processes are what drives cellular processes. That's not what, or biomolecular actions cause, so chemistry causes biomolecular activity. He showed that that's not true. It's actually boundary conditions within the cell, pressure, heat differential, fluid flows, all these kinds of things that are all bound by pressure and heat primarily, and that those are actually determined by Earth's gravity, right? After 4.5 billion years of evolving here. So the reason we atrophy and all that, yes, is the lack of gravity, et cetera. But really, the bigger problem we have is that all of these cellular processes start breaking down because they don't have the pressure, fluid, compression, et cetera, of gravity here on Earth. And that this is work with Dr. Mike Levin out of Tufts University and Nick Lane at, I think, King's College, of demonstrating that actually even the biochemical or the biochemical processes and biomolecular processes or biosystemic processes themselves are not just driven by the boundary conditions of Earth, gravity, but also driven by Earth's electromagnetic field and electromagnetic field fluctuations. You can't simulate either of those. And even if we were and the cells are extraordinarily adaptive, right, as we see with extremophiles, et cetera. But if you go for any length of time, which maybe is possible, it's a one-way trip. Because in order for your cells to acclimatize to the gravity of where you're going and the electromagnetic field, you will, at the cellular level, hundreds of trillions of cells will have changed fundamentally without any real need for change in genetics, which will happen too, right? You'll get genes turned on and off, et cetera, epigenetically. So that escape vector is not available to us. Point is that we're going to have to fix our own damn problems here on Earth. At least for the next century, we're going to have to pay attention to each other and we're going to have to sit down and we're going to have to work out all this complex nonsense. And we're going to have to, we're going to have to take as a basis of everything we're doing that thermodynamics rule everything, everything. For the things that they want to do with AI, the things they want to do with singularity or some combination and neural chips and even the surveillance state isn't possible thermodynamically. That's the other thing with people stressing out about the surveillance states. Like, folks, you got to understand something. In order for the surveillance state that they're telling, that they're feeding us the fear factor, and they are the ones feeding it, they're selling it to us as this all-powerful thing, knowing it's not possible thermodynamically.
Well, it's
It's
like
not
COVID, right?
possible. I'm
It's
sorry.
COVID. It's like COVID. They're
It's
playing
just like COVID.
the fear card, right?
Exactly.
Oh, it's a killer. It stays on surfaces for 3 days. Everybody freaks out. Then they go home.
We're all
Yeah.
powerful, right? We can do this thing. If we look throughout history, and then Stephen, I'll hand over to you because this is your area, information warfare. If we look throughout history, all societies, all civilizations, et cetera, the ruling elite invested heavily in prediction because they realized fairly early on, you can look at this, the Egyptians, et cetera, that if they had predictive powers better because they understood the natural flows of things and how to read the signals of the natural flows of things, then they can tell you that they were the ones doing it. They were behind it. Whereas the other civilization societies that tried to actually control the weather and tried to actually control these things, the flows of river and rains and all of that failed. And so they lose power. But if you spend, so we could spend $100 trillion trying to control the weather and never succeed. But we could spend $3 trillion convincing you, looking at predictive models so that we can tell you we're controlling the weather.
Yeah. And that's, again, the whole game's about narrative and influence, right?
Yeah.
And influencing operations take a long time. Like, here's a perfect example. There was somebody basically dropped dead in the Oval Office yesterday during a presser, and the left has cherry picked one image specifically of Trump standing there, basically looking away from the situation, and it's a millisecond, right? But they've replayed that over and over and over again across all the bots and all the influencers and et cetera to reinforce the narrative, orange man bad, right? They've been playing that narrative and working that narrative for almost, it's
His whole
almost 10
life.
years at this point, right?
Well, but his whole life too. If you look at New York, this anti-Trump stuff's been going on since the 80s, since you and I were younger, Steve.
Yeah. But right now it's all orange man bad,
It's
right?
absolutely.
And so you replay things over and over and over again until people, ingrain it, normalize it, and then believe it. And
Maybe some of them don't, and this is again your area, not mine, but my observations is that most people don't believe it. They just accept it as this is the narrative we have to all go with if we're going to fit in, if we're going to
but
be in the in group.
oh, I agree with that. I think there's so that two things could be true at once, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have the group that doesn't like Trump, but they'll go along with the narrative, regardless if they believe it or not. Then you have the people that are ardent,
Yeah, yeah,
Trump
yeah. Yeah,
derangement
yeah, yeah.
syndrome. Then you have the people in the middle of the road that are just left leaning and want to be loyal to the party. They're going to go along with the narratives, right? I'm talking about, for any influencing operation to work, you have to have a certain percentage of the population that actually buys the narrative and is willing to act on any of the messaging that you want them to act on.
Three to five
And that
percent.
percentage is about 65 plus. 65 is pretty low. You need about, if you really want action, you need 80% of the population to buy into the narrative. If
Mhm.
you want some action, you want disruption, you can do it at 50 and 60, but you got to be really good with messaging. And that's a very, very hard. And there's some talented people doing it, but still you have to be extremely talented to get those 50 that 50% to act without a majority. And again,
But
we're go ahead.
you
I
only
mean,
need three, to your numbers, you only need 3 to 5% who are actively engaged in the messaging itself. You need the other 50, 60% to go along with it,
yeah,
right? You only
exactly.
need
Yeah,
3 to 5%
exactly.
who are actively engaged in the
Yeah.
messaging.
But
Yeah.
I'm talking about consensus, right? 50% of
Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
consensus, right? Who
Yeah.
who pulls the trigger doesn't matter, right? It's like I think of it as when you're in a sales meeting, right? And you got five people on each side of the table negotiating a deal. If somebody says we can give you this for free on the other side of the table, it doesn't matter who said it. This side of the table heard we could give that to you for free. So that's the deal. And it's the same thing with information warfare, right? When you push it across the table, whatever they hear, that's the deal. And if you can get them to hear enough of them to hear it long enough, they'll go along with whatever. Look at how many people went along with the double masking nonsense. It was absolute nonsense. And there's still people that are double and triple masked. They have no idea the health impact it's having on them, but they bought the narrative, right? So the 3 to 5% that will act, they're not nearly as important as the 45 or 50% that will go along with it.
Okay. So I have a question for you. Okay. Something you just triggered a thought. The double, triple masking folks, for the first time in their life, feel like they belong to something that's publicly visible. So you're going to get a number of people in these groups who are going to go along with things because it's the first time or the only time they can visibly in public participate in a thing that's accepted. It's part of the in group, even if it's an extreme variant or a nonsense variant, but it gives them some meaning and purpose that they have no other way.
Yeah, it's like all the Karens that they think about all the Karens that were enforcing masks at stores, calling in their neighbors. What you do is you're energizing that part of the population that has no voice. And so they feel empowered. Once they're empowered, they'll go along with anything, especially if they've been disenfranchised from a system that's marginalized them, right? You can get them to do whatever. I mean, think of it as this is going to piss people off, but it's true. The most dangerous people on the planet are either born again Christians, it's born again anything in any religion, because they have something to prove. And you would be surprised at how easy it is to activate and energize them emotionally when they're new to trying to, and because most of them are coming from some kind of a broken home situations, they've hit rock bottom, they're looking for salvation. I mean, why do you think that the intelligence services prey on mentally ill, autistic, some of those loners that are disenfranchised? It's because they're easily manipulated
They want to belong.
through emotion, and you can do it. And they're the similar to the born agains because they want to prove themselves and
So
belong.
every human being is motivated by one force, and that is the need to assess one's status in the community, in the whole. And the only way we can, any of us, even the insane, can assess our status in a population is based off of our contributions, right? Our labor, intellectual, emotional, physical, but based off of our labors and how those labors are valued in that population. That's what motivates everybody, even the insane. And so it's not that systems marginalize people. That's not generally what happens. What I have a cat that's going to attack the computer here in a second, because she wants to feel like she's contributing. Um, Stop it, girl. Um, it's generally that what these people have to offer is not very high value in the populace and in the whole. And so if you can give them something, no matter how bad it is, that gives, and this is Steve, the folks you despise so much, the pedophile enablers, et cetera, in the messed up communities that they work in and function in, it gives them some ability to earn some status for doing something for the whole, no matter how fucked up it is. So the point being is even the resentfuls and the responsibles, they're both driven by the same need to assess their status in the status hierarchy and the overall community by their contributions. And so you give these people some fucked up way to earn status and have it recognized, they'll do the most atrocious things.
Oh yeah. That the if you take away the linear view of it, they're just responding in a culture of abuse, right? So most of them that are the hardcore pedophiles, they've been ritualistically abused. So for them, it's just fitting into the culture that's been normalized. So anyway, we started out talking about this in related to AI and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not feasible. And why all this matters, why all these things matter is there's limitations to everything, right? When I talk about the control grid, I don't talk about the limitations or their ability to actually pull it off. What I try and get people to realize is every time you sign up for something new that's digital, you expose more of yourself to to whatever control grid they can put in place, right? Because they have the ability to put control measures in place to limit, your bank accounts, to limit, but that there's only so much they can do there too, right? Because the banking system's still disjointed. The even TSA is very disjointed. So there's still a few years away from doing anything at scale, right? And when we talk about stuff, we're talking about at scale. And AI is the same thing, right? They can't do anything at scale right now
No,
because they
yeah,
don't have the distributed capability or the compute to do it. And that said, even though they're building all these data centers, you still have to power them, right? We don't have the
correct.
power generation.
And
We don't
cool
have the
them. Yeah,
infrastructure. Oh, Jesus, cooling's a whole separate deal,
yeah,
right? So even though this is going to be and I've gone back and forth on both of these topics, right? Because I know we can do a lot of automation at scale, and we can do a lot of compute at scale, but it's very limited what it can do, right? Like, and I'll give you a case in point. ServiceNow is one of the biggest ticketing systems in the world. And I was on the ground floor when we built out all the security stack and on all their original data centers. And then we migrated to a different set of data centers that were bigger for colos. And we could do replication. We could do geographically separated replication at scale and move petabytes of data. But what it took to get there was like a Herculean feat to do it, right? We had some of the best minds in the industry. We had, one of the guys that was an architect for Yahoo, one of the guys who was an architect for eBay, one of the guys who was an architect for Microsoft Azure. I mean, I worked with a lot of Microsoft guys, and these guys thought at scale, right? When you talk about Microsoft, they don't talk about one or two users. They're talking about enterprises across the entire planet, how they could service them. And it took a lot just to do replication, right? So you have a virtual instance, and then you want to replicate all the data, like for like General Electric, that's got thousands of tickets, thousands of development problems, thousands of automation tools that they're all, their help desk is working. That's a huge amount of data, right? So you have to be able to, one, replicate those two data centers without corrupting databases at scale, real time. And that's a huge feat to do that. A very, very huge feat. So,
so I don't know if you know this, Stephen. My first company that I got funded was building high-end data centers. That's what we did. Peering points, meet me rooms for telecom operators, CLEX, ILEX, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, this is 25 years ago, but I had also, before that, I've been doing that for the fintech and banking space, working for a company called NextCard with a gentleman named Sean Dean building out their data centers and meet me rooms. And well, they didn't have meet me rooms, pairing points, but they had data centers, for the banking and all of that. On anybody who knows anything from 25 years ago to today, data centers have not become more efficient. There is no way technologically, in fact, they become bigger power sucks than they ever were before. And cooling sucks, right? The most amount of power that has to go in is into cooling because, yes, we've gotten higher density compute and storage capabilities, but they suck more power. Even though they're, lower power requirement per unit, we've got a lot more of the units in there, right? Like quad core, servers and eight, so point being is that thermodynamically, we've maximized what we can do in data center efficiency, and it ain't much. And very much to something you said earlier about monetization. Well, what are those data centers doing? They're processing bits and bytes, but they're not really doing anything other than that. And the only way that they're paid for is artificial economic financialism because hard economics, productivity, return on labor-based economics can't afford those things. It's why Russia and China don't build out they're not chasing building out massive data centers or massive amounts of compute capabilities. They're building out what they need, you know, industry specific, and most of those are national security oriented,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the banking and other sectors that require compute capabilities are building those out for themselves, but they're much, you know, this is a genuine concern for me, is that just as we invested 30 years into woke and the smartest, most well-fed, healthiest, um, most leisure time available to learn and study and develop their mind generations that have ever been, young Xers through older Gen Z, what did we do with all that, those 30 years? We sucked all that time and energy and effort up into training them to be woke objects. What did we lose in the sciences and in the mathematics and in genuine sociology? And, what did we lose productivity wise as an actual economy because we took all the best and brightest, potential best and brightest years that we've had so far as a country and poured them into trash, into pure garbage? Okay, well, we're still going to have to deal with that. The other thing I'm worried about now is we went from that to now we're building out all kinds of data centers. We're going to AI. We're investing heavily in all these things that are not thermodynamically and therefore not economically sustainable, as opposed to investing in infrastructure and manufacturing and, hard line, baseline things that are absolutely necessary for an actual economy.
Yeah. And so I think, I have two thoughts on this. And,
Mm.
I think the first one is I think this is the newest toy that, the bright shiny object. I think the bubble's going to burst soon. I think
Yeah,
they're
it's
already
already
telling us the
started. It's
bubble's
already
going to,
started.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I think what I'm curious about is what's the next big thing, right? Is
Well, there,
what's the next bright shiny object and new toy that they want to play with? And then the second thought I have on this is that for the things that we do get out of AI right now or language learning models, you know, my I have the same thought process that I did when all the hype started, and that is we still need guardrails around AI development, language learning models, all of the technology that we have now, because so much is being done on the fly. And I look at it as like Wikipedia, right? Or a perfect example is Elon talks about Google's AI that they released, and it was basically just a liberal pile of hurl.
yeah.
And it was trained to It was literally trained to look at history and then lie, right? There needs to be guardrails so that doesn't happen. That, you know, the problem with the whole liberal crowd, I'm just going to say both crowds because they're both sides are guilty of
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah. Two
is they
wings of the
want to,
same bird.
yeah, they
Yeah.
want to rewrite history to fit their narrative, right? We have to get out of that as humans. We have to get out of that mindset and write history the way history occurs so that we can learn from it and grow from it, right? There's too many rich people that have influence over information. And I go back to the movie Sneakers, where Ben Kingsley says, War of the future is not going to be about beans, bullets, and gas. It's about information. And the elite have figured that out. The problem is they've tainted so much of our history. They've tainted so much of the information that it may take us generations to figure out what's really transpired in the last 50 years here, right? That's how
So
much history has been rewritten.
yeah, so I'm totally with you. I will say this, having dealt with very wealthy families, even some royal family members, not just the British, but others. Um, Most of the truly ultra high net worth people I know don't have any access to any better information or history than we do. It's that upper middle class and lower upper class that, runs everything in the world that has been writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting, intel and history and science and everything else. And so the people at the bottom and the top are both being fed the same trash, right? So I have some friends of mine, well, a friend of mine, and then some other folks that I know are working on an LLM. They're trying to design it. I think it's called Runcible. It's going to launch. They're fundraising right now for a large fundraise. But what they're trying to do is build an LLM that can't lie, to the guardrail you're talking about. That, um, and I don't know exactly how they're going to do it because I did my doctoral studies in this field, right? In multivariate sentiment analysis and looking at large language models and inference and all that, all that stuff. And um, there's two fundamental problems. One is you have to use large training data, two ways you do it, unstructured or structured learning for these systems. And the structured learning, well, that's all valence identified information. It's all so heavily biased. It's unreal, right? Because it was designed and developed, these training models were designed and developed in the peak of woke. That wasn't accidental. That was done intentional. That's why they were working so hard to get into the language departments and started there, and then so hard in the engineering departments, et cetera. Okay. The second piece is, okay, so let's do unstructured learning. Well, then you got another same problem. The only people who have the pedigrees to get hired into these jobs to, you know, assess whether the output of the machine in unstructured learning is valid or not are the same people who went to the same damn educational programs, right? And like, I don't know, I haven't been able to get to him. I know a couple of people close to him, but I haven't been able to get to him. But if I was, two things that Elon could do with X, it would make, XAI, it would make it the most powerful in the world. One, train it on memes, real memes, right? Not the trash stuff that comes from, government-minded people. And the other one is bring some down dirty, swearing war fighters in to help you assess, right? Particularly special operations guys that have done unconventional warfare and, modern foreign internal defense and these other things, and bring them in to help tell you whether the output of the machine is valid or not, and also to tell the pencil head, hey, shut the hell up. That's not how that fucking works. This is how people will actually work. This is what that actually means. If he was to do those two things, which is never going to happen because the gatekeepers will never allow it, right? He would have XAI would be one of the most powerful tools in the world.
Um,
Yes, it would.
so to kind of two things earlier. One is it doesn't seem to be all for naught. We're talking about the power and the cooling. And then I think the other day, right, Bill Gates came out and that's where you really see it. He goes, yeah, it's climate change isn't that bad. He kind of said that. To me, that says that the shift is they gotta they it's gonna be nuclear and it can't be anything but nuclear. So that's kind of how I'm trying to find like the silver lining. Again, the Zeppelins to the Bible. It's like, hey, maybe this was just a way to get the nuclear, like whatever, I'll take
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It
yeah, yeah.
is. It is. It's they're
Yeah,
moving to the micro salt reactors is what they're moving to, right?
yeah,
And
that's a win.
yeah, and that's well,
Okay.
you can't consider that a win with Bill Gates because everything that motherfucker does.
No, 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 fuck him. I'm not talking about him.
Okay,
Mm,
because
I mean, in
well, let's
large, that we're maybe trying to roll out nuclear more.
okay. Well, let's pause a moment because Tommy, you're absolutely right. But I want to pause a moment. Bill Gates has been, I have no doubt of this whatsoever. Bill Gates and his ilk have been told, you are going to participate and you're going to work with us to move this in this direction now. We're not doing that anymore. You're going to move in this direction, or we're going to use this on the Epstein list, or we're going to use this over here, and we're going to destroy you. This is what happens in these power shifts, these power transitions, when power transitions to the responsibles faction, away from the two resentfuls factions. This is what happens. You don't go
can they
directly
just
at it. Mhm.
can they just destroy the motherfucker and get it
No,
over with,
unfortunately, you
please?
can't.
Can-
No, unfortunately, that's it leaves power vacuums of fragments. There is a massively powerful system and organization, institution, and a vast amount of
I know
wealth,
there is, but I'm just
right?
playing devil's advocate, right?
Well,
It,
when he's 92 and he thinks he's untouchable, somebody walks into his house and pops him in the head. And anyway, sorry, I'm not recommending that anybody. I'm
This is an entertainment show legally.
just entertainment. No, and I mean genuinely, I'm not recommending that. What I'm saying is that there is immense investment that's gone into Microsoft and all related. There's immense investments in the things that Gates has been the head of. Gates is quite literally leading the Rockefeller Foundation and all of that. He took it from, I think, Nelson Rockefeller or whichever Rockefeller directly handed off.
one of the
That's over a
douchebags.
century worth of wealth and power and systems. So you don't just throw that away. You don't cut the head off the top. You go in with power and say, you are now going to do these things, or we will cut your head off, right? We will destroy these things. Okay. And we're going to do it with this evidence. Okay. Which is, I think, what we've been trying to put together the last 6 years. Okay. So Tommy, you're absolutely right. We are moving to nuclear. Steve, I don't know if we're going to do thorium, which is what you're talking about. Pebble bed nuclear reactors. I worked on this as an analyst, financial analyst, trying to figure out if we were going to move these into China. The French are far, far ahead in the technology. It's very solid. It's very sound. It's very secure, right? These pebble bed nuclear reactors just lock themselves down. They can't run away, all that kind of stuff. So it's probably still nuclear. Nuclear. Also look at uranium stocks, uranium mining, all that kind of stuff. You'll see the signals there. Okay. So Tommy, you're absolutely right. Moving the energy wise, solid, absolutely solid, and absolutely essential. Um, we still have a fight ahead of us though, because it turns out there's no such thing as peak oil because the earth just keeps producing it, right? It's a natural geological process and function. It's just a chemical reaction in the earth. We just keep producing this stuff. So, so still going to be a fight between the nuclear folks and the petroleum folks. I think that's being dealt with as well. The real problem, though, that we have sustaining is that it doesn't. Okay, so energy, we deal with the energy side of it. The other side, though, is that we cannot create enough dense compute density and efficiency to simulate even one human body of 100 trillion cells and the computational complexity that goes on in one single human body. All computational resources on Earth, including smartphones, smart devices, and everything else combined today, everything's supercomputers, all of it. If you stood up 1 second of one human being's biological computations, computational power and energy utilization, heat dissipation, right? All of that, signaling, and you put it up against every bit of signaling, communications, compute on Earth that we've created synthetically, the synthetic stuff is an infinitesimal fraction of what's going on in your own body already, right? We cannot replicate what the computational power and efficiency of biological life. Just can't. Now, maybe in 100 million years or a million years we might, but we're not even close. We'd have to have a fundamentally different understanding of chemistry and physics and compute. That being said, the singularity happened. that Kurzweil's talking about. Only we didn't upload into the machine. The machine's downloaded into us. And now the machine is already, right? The computations, the information warfare, all of this stuff is happening in all of us human beings. And we're having we're doing vast amount. This is what these shows are. We're doing this vast amount of computational stuff all day long. And then we're having shows and communicating about it. The singularity happened, only we didn't go into the machine. The machine has come into us and it is expanding. This is what fifth generation warfare really is. The machine came into us and it's expanding infinitely within humans because we have that thermodynamically, neutral or basically neutral thermodynamic computational resource. It's called our cells. It's called our neuronal systems, et cetera.
The
Right?
other, yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, the other, and as an aside, a book you might really like, yeah, both of you, is Global
Mm.
Brain by Howard Bloom. I've had him on here before.
Interesting.
He's an awesome dude. He's a brilliant dude. The next thing I was just thinking earlier about, like when Steve was saying China and Russia aren't going, balls out with the AI thing, and I don't give as much credence to this, but just as a thought, there is something to be said for the idea of it's like, well, what's the theory behind why the moon landing was fake? What is the benefit? Well, if you can get the Soviets to bankrupt themselves, right? So just as a concept, that feels pretty.
That's
That's a pretty decent idea. Is there anything behind the idea of like we think there might be a chance of AI, but a lot of us is like, let's just fucking go all out, put $1 trillion into this. If we put 1 million, they'd be like, yeah, whatever. If you put 1 trillion, other countries are gonna be like, should I be doing that? Like, should I be doing that too? When like people like
yeah,
line up
yeah.
outside other places, you're like, should I be lined up there? What are we
The
doing?
pr the problem is the world's greatest electrical engineers are Russians, and the greatest computer engineers are Chinese. And more importantly, physics. Most 40% of our scientific research papers in the United States originally authored by Chinese descent people, many of which are Chinese, and others which are American Chinese or British Chinese. So the problem is that unlike Star Wars, which is what you're referencing, the very people who are 40% or more of the individuals who are giving us the technologies and the technical capabilities to do this very thing are actually from the very countries we're trying to influence, or ethnic groups, et cetera, that we're trying to influence, right? To overspend in something that doesn't work. They just look at it and like, yeah, that doesn't work. Now, to the extent it does work, yes, they're using it
In very limited use cases. Yeah.
in limited, yeah, where it is thermodynamically in a greater ecosystem, an additive or at least neutral.
So something that's maybe not a mirage would be, I don't know, we're talking about like the 100,000x increase in productivity and all those promises, which are always horseshit. But there could be something, if I just had to play devil's advocate, would be automation, for the Tesla's bots that are going to come online. Theoretically, you could say, well, that's a real thing. We could start producing our own cheap shit that we buy from China. And if you have automation, well, what's the bottleneck? Power. I mean, if we use the AI Mirage to get a bunch of nuclear power plants online, and then you use actual automation, that is a real threat to China. If we can start producing our own fake shit or cheap
Okay, but
shit.
here's the problem. The only way that that works is the US consumer base has to be consuming and growing at a certain rate. Otherwise, why are we producing all this shit? Right? This is the other thing that's the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is that the world's populations are collapsing. And we've spent the last century and a half, 2 centuries building consumer-based economies everything about our world is oriented towards a 2.5% growth in population and a 4.5% or greater growth in economics, underlying productivity gains, minimum. Well, what happens when you're having global scale population decline? This is the real reason they're building out all these AI centers and data is not to some great AI evolution or revolution. It's so that they can simulate that growth by computers talking to computers doing stupid, crazy shit that doesn't mean a damn thing in the real world. but they can articulate it in such a way that it compensates for that lack of population growth. Okay, so we'll do a 2.2 to 2.4 percent bot growth per year, simulating humans, and we'll do a 4.5 to 5.5% economic expansion simulated based off of the activity that those bots are doing, all of which requires an ever-growing amount of power utilization and compute.
Is it is it necessarily a bad thing? I don't know why the thing that's popping in my mind is I remember seeing something about some forward operating base somewhere where every day before every meal, each soldier had to go fill up like a 1 pound bag of sand and you add it to the exterior. And it was the concept of just continually improving. And at this point, the walls were 10 feet thick, but the idea was like it's better than nothing. In that same sense, as far as so let's say AGI, ASI, let's say that's all Mirage. Is it necessarily bad to rapidly expand our computational capabilities just to have it? Like, is that
Well,
necessarily, Steve?
it all comes down to monetization, right? I mean, I can't think of the term that was used, but it's Bracken talked about it on his show with on Mike Ferris on Coffee and a Mike that they we keep funding all of these organizations. Like Twitter was really a ghost town before Elon Musk bought it. It was just funded by USAID and by other tools to keep it running, to keep the illusion that it was a solvent company with millions
It
of
was a bot
users.
farm. It
It
was a
was a
bot.
total bot farm, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with AI. You have to be able to monetize it for it to be sustainable in any fashion, right? And it's got to be monetized at scale, right? Because you have to do this shit at scale. You can't just, I keep talking about it, but I don't think people really realize why it's important to do everything at scale. Because you to make money, like, I'll use an online game platform as a perfect example. Look at like player PUBG or Fortnite or even the Call of Duty series, right? They all have these massive worlds where millions of concurrent players are playing all at the same time. And the way they monetize is not people buying the game.
Yeah,
It's the in-game content that they're selling, the digits, right? You buy the skins, you buy the
yeah.
weapons, you buy all the attachments, you buy all the other shit, and it's all just ones and zeros. But that's how they monetize it at scale to be able to support that massive infrastructure, right? The problem with AI is right now it's just a dope that people are asking questions and communicating with to teach it. And there's no way to monetize it because it can't really do anything productive yet. And until it can do something productive, they can't monetize it to make it profitable to where they're not pumping billions of we're out of the business of pumping billions of dollars into a cause right now because we're fucking broke. So
We're broke
we're
3 generations out. We can't take from any more generations.
that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I hate having conversations with you is you
Mm.
always put things into context that is it's right to the point. You're spot on, right? We're we've sucked, the next 3 generations dry as far as,
Yeah.
and they've bled out as much of
Yeah.
the economy as they could possibly fucking grift,
Yeah.
and they can't take anymore. So we can't those big causes, and it's like this conversation about we're going to go back to the moon and put moon bases on. No, we're not. You can't put fucking humans on the moon for longer than 6 months. You can't
Yeah.
rotate. Do you know, just to give you an idea of how expensive it is to operate in space, right? And this is the part I listen to people talk, and I'm like, you have no fucking idea how expensive it is to operate in space. First of all, everything you do, it's like being a ship at sea. You have to carry everything with you. It doesn't matter how long or what you're going to do. Everything you need to do to whatever mission you're going to, you have to take it all with you. And once you get it up there, you're not bringing it back. And then you have to keep cycling supplies there and people there to keep it ongoing. And I don't know about you, but I'm too fucking old to go up there and spend 6 months and have my body atrophy because I would probably never leave a wheelchair when I came back. As cool as it would be, I couldn't do it. Plus, there's the problem of the Van Allen radiation belt, which I don't think anybody solved yet. So even the concept of us going into deep space sounds really cool, but we have a lot of problems to solve before we could ever get that far. And we just don't have the money or the capacity to do it because it's massively expensive.
The
And
So,
devil's
go ahead.
advocate is I think there's a lot of people that would just to do it. They would go, yeah, I don't care if I come back. I don't care if I fucking die. I mean, you have guys with base jump in a wingsuit all the time for no other reason than to do it. And then the other thing is just, I mean, well, I mean, the military at large, it's a contract that like you might lose your life. I think that's another thing you might have. There's people that look at it as a form of service. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but adrenaline junkies who don't care, and then people who are willing to, they have that backbone to go, I'm going to work for something greater. That right there kind of knocks out at that giant impetus of coming back. Just
so I think one day we will be multiplanetary. I think one day, I think it's farther away than we thought. And Tommy, I think to your question, I do believe that if we can sustain it, that building out all this compute capability is going to be a net positive. And I think if we can come to a rapprochement and a balance with the other two great civilizations out there, the Russians and the Chinese, where we're each providing something unique, right? One of the things that's been so unique about the English speaking peoples and has made us so successful, one of the most successful civilizations in the history of the world, is that we are by nature a very innovative people. And in order to, in order for us to get to where we're trying to be, we've got to innovate a vast amount more than we have so far in all kinds of ways, monetary ways, financial ways. We need to stop impoverishing the future, right? That's one thing. We need to stop doing that as the basis of some monetary system. We need to stop, you know, funding and fight and back, we need to stop paying the mafia, the financial mafia, a cut of our lives. Because that's what, when we're paying taxes and we're paying fees to things, that's a part of somebody's life. That is X numbers of minutes or hours or days of a person's life. We need to stop paying parts of a human life for these things. It's ludicrous. And specifically, I had this conversation earlier today with my team. Easily 90% of the things that we do between one another that makes things work have zero margins. They're humans sharing information with humans. I've done a bunch of computation. Steve's done a bunch of computation. You've done a bunch of computation, information and uptake and talks and computation, and we're sharing a conversation. If somebody tried to come in and monetize this, there's a tiny little freaking margin. There's no margin between us. Maybe somebody can come in and make some money off of advertising or some other thing. Most people don't realize that virtually all tech is funded by advertising. Virtually all, right? It's a totally artificial, the whole system's artificial. But if it works, okay. But point is, we've got a vast amount of innovation that is necessary. Building, I think, if we can get past this next bottleneck. So, are you guys familiar with eigenvalues in physics, particle physics? So, an eigenvalue is, so electrons are in different orbitals around the nucleus, right? And and that's an eigenvalue. And in order for an electron to go down an orbital closer to the nucleus or farther away, up an orbital, a vast amount of energy and information is exchanged. And it's like, depending if it's going down, it might take 1,000 to 1 improvement, right, in efficiency and information. And to go up, which is slip out an orbital, you might lose 100 to 1 information and energy, right? Humanity has got to go up an eigen or go down an eigenvalue in sophistication and complexity. And this mass amounts of compute can help us do that by taking a lot of the memorization and a lot of the base computational, processing, right, of things out that then frees up humanity to do more much more sophisticated, complex thinking so that we can innovate in all kinds of fields and domains. But we can't do that, or the way in which we are oriented right now as this fragmented group. Okay, Steve, that's kind of spooky. Um,
I wasn't gonna say anything. I was like, the fuck is that?
I couldn't help it.
right?
My camera went stupid, and I'm like, see, it keeps adjusting itself and turning
Uh,
on and off.
um,
So,
that is hilarious.
so I'm
Um,
like, I might as well go all in.
we're gonna, I keep coming back to this, but the only thing I can see that unifies us enough so that we can throw away a bunch of the stupid processing we've been doing as people is we need to go back to our civilization and adhere to it and say, listen, this is what we stand for. This is who we are. This is what we'll fight for and defend. We've got a lot of work to do to continue to move forward in the world. We've got to improve as, at least our civilizational people need to improve. And here's the tools we're building out to do it. Let's get to that. Let's stop chasing this stupid shit that we're chasing. Let's stop trying to rewrite our history. Let's stop trying to reinterpret every little nuanced thing. Let's stop chasing the little, you know, um, sorority girl snide bullshit as if that's stuff we got to pay attention to. I don't mean to pick on just sorority girls because sorority boys can be some pretty bad, snippy little shits too, right? So that's my thought. My thought is that yes, Tommy, there is the potential that this can be a substantive improvement, particularly for us because we are English speaking peoples, and innovation is at the heart and core of who we are. And that can be of value for the whole world. But we've got these resentfuls that are reeled through everything, and all they want to do is just have everybody fighting everybody.
I think what you said about the eigenvalues, and I have no idea if this is accurate, but right, it's the idea of like, well, you don't have to memorize phone numbers anymore, or you don't have to go to the library to, and for all the drawbacks of
Yeah,
Google
yeah,
and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
But what I've always looked at it as is like, well, if I no longer have to memorize 1,000 phone numbers, I just have to know how to type in someone's name using an alphabet I know. Or if I no longer have to go to the library and get,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
request this book, if I can just go to Google and read about, whatever the Yalta conference. What that does is frees up a lot of extra time. Now, and some people just use it to be lazier, but I look at it like all the things around this. Like I don't go get an education in videography or audio editing
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
lighting.
Yeah.
And what that allows me to do is that allows me to make this podcast and for however many people it's reached and the minds put together. So it's I don't think it's necessarily all, and I'm in agreement with you. It's not all for naught, and
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think there's zero positives. I mean, a lot of people are retarded and they'll just use it to be like, whatever. But I think for some people, the industrious, it will enhance them rapidly.
I
So
think so.
no,
I think so. I think, and the work Steve's doing on the counter information warfare side of things helps, right?
Well,
It's
that's the problem, right? And one of the biggest pieces of feedback I've gotten since I started doing this, 5 years ago, was we had no until you came along, till we found your podcast or your website or whatever. We had no place to go to find information that could tell us if any of this stuff was real and how much of this we should be listening to. Like, um, I think one of the interesting developments over the last 6 months, especially in the Twitter space, is more and more people because of the show. I have no idea what my camera's doing.
you're good.
It's like it's
You're good.
focused on my hand. Anyway, in the last 6 months, more and more people are starting to realize that bots control social media, and that what they're 90% of what they're seeing is just bot driven
it's
nonsense.
not even real. Yeah.
Oh God, I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
even look
yeah.
at my Twitter feed because it's just full of liberal tropes, right? And
Yeah.
if I look at my following feed, I get 2 day old shit. I don't get anything current. And, even Musk is starting to realize it too. Like, hey, the bots have taken over. And I think what we're heading towards is a culmination point in social media where they eliminate bots altogether. And I know the establishment doesn't want that to happen, Um, but I think the public's going to start demanding it because there is no source of truth. No matter what we try and put out there, it either gets shadow banned, censored, and people are fed up with that. They want to know what's the truth, what's real, what's not real. They're tired of the gaslighting. And I'll use the this Mandami thing because that's a perfect example of gaslighting. This guy was installed. They have
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
institutionalized cheating in Oregon, Washington, California, Massachusetts, Vermont,
Everywhere.
New York,
Everywhere. Texas.
even
Yep.
here in Arizona. And what's interesting to me is their 2020 was not about the presidential election. The presidential steal in
Nope.
2020 was just a distraction away from the
Yep.
down ballot. They wanted the
Yep.
swing states in the down ballot, but
Mhm.
most importantly, they wanted to institutionalize the cheating and put people in place in the key positions that could legalize the cheating. Like this
Yep.
Prop 50 in
Yep.
California. The only thing it's about is gerrymandering, so they always stay in control.
Yes.
The fact that you have to show your ID to a police officer, but you don't have to verify your identity when you go in to vote, it's insane to me. But
Yeah.
that was the direct second and third order effects of them stealing the 2020 down ballot. And then come to 2022 and 2024, then they stole the governor's offices and they stole the AG offices in like 10 states. And no, and this is
And
my problem with
senators in Congress too.
yeah, and this
Yep.
is my problem with the current situation is this only ends one way. You're not going to vote your way out of this now. This ends with gunfire. That's the only way it's going to end because, and you can disagree. I know you're going
No,
to disagree, which
no,
is
no, no,
fine.
no. No, I don't
But
disagree
the
necessarily.
reality is this was architected for one of two outcomes. Either we submit and agree to communism or we fight. And that's really what the big picture is. And um, so I see all of this moving towards a culmination point. I thought it was going to be 2 years ago because in November of 2024, everybody I knew was gearing up for civil war. If Harris would have won, I guarantee you would have been civil war. And the powers that be recognized it because they weren't ready for civil war yet, and they pushed it off and they brought us Trump. I don't think Trump's any different than anybody else. Surrounded by the same assholes, same foreign policy, same domestic policy, same fiscal policy. It's all the same shit.
I
What
don't
is
quite agree with that, but
But what is changing though is the public
Mhm.
consciousness is starting to wake up to the gaslighting. That's where I was going with all of this.
Yeah, no, no, Steve, you're absolutely right. You know, what people have forgotten, including our own bloody military people, is that geography and the human beings, right? So geographic terrain and human terrain are the only assets. All this other stuff is illusion and made up. Well, geographic terrain and human terrain is always local. So if you want to win a war, you have to hold geographic and human terrain. To hold geographic terrain, you have to actually hold the human terrain. That's the only way you win wars. Well, the enemy knows that. And they own, and that's, it's like the piece I wrote the other day about, well, we think we're going to win a civil war. Yeah, sorry, they own all of the ports. They are in control of virtually every single port, city, and town in and out of this country, whether it's air, land, or sea. And
Yep.
so, okay. So, well, but we have their food. They'll get supplied food from overseas, right?
Yep. I
We
mean,
don't
it
have
go,
a bit. There's no way we could have a navy large enough, even with all of our naval powers. Even if we pulled it back, we couldn't blockade everything,
yeah.
right?
And
So,
then there's the problem
mhm.
of even if we did take a blue state with on a littoral, who's going to supply us?
Who's gonna? Okay, that's exactly right. So, well, I'm less worried. We can supply ourselves. I'm less worried about us being supplied and being cut off. What I'm more worried about is that an enemy could use all of the control that they have to continue to resupply themselves if the heart of the country won't resupply them anymore.
Well, that there is yet another problem, right? Is the you know I don't want to say the elite, but the folks line because I think
Well,
the city of
let's call
London.
it the upper middle class and the lower upper classes who our enemies are.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
they've made a deal with the devil, right?
Yeah.
Because they're
Faustian. Yeah,
making a
yeah, yeah.
deal with the Islamic side and a deal with the Chinese. They don't realize they're going to get screwed over by both of them at
It's not
some
the
point.
Chinese. Chinese want nothing to do with this.
The
That's not
Chinese
the
are
China.
still they're
It's
still
not the
here.
it's not the Chinese. Yeah, of course there's going to be Chinese here. There's 4 billion of them, 1.3 billion. And we brought them in here. Look at the Burlingame Sewer Treaty, right? Anson Burlingame. We brought them over here in the 1860s because we had all of our boys fighting war and we needed labor. So we signed the Burlingame Sewer Treaty to give China nation status so that we can import coolies, right? Or Chinese peasants who were the ones who actually built most of the railroads and the mines and et cetera, so that our white boys can continue and some of the black boys can continue to fight and die in the Civil War, which was, Steve, you mentioned the city London was the city of London War. That was
Absolutely, it was. Yeah.
so far
Ultimately, I
we've
think that's who's behind a lot of this,
well,
right?
that's who's behind all of it, right?
Yeah.
This is the financialist, and they're deeply embedded. I think they're getting kicked out of the city of London. That's why they're flooding, or out of the United Kingdom, out of the English-speaking world. That's why they're flooding with Muslims, and that's why they're deeply embedded in Qatar, although we're cutting that off, and in the UAE, which we're not cutting off yet.
I think that's next. That's
It's
next.
coming. Yeah, it's coming through financial transition to stable coins, et cetera, which are their own malevolence. Um, give me 1 second. Because now what we'll do is we will transition from the financialist Ponzi scheme to treasury Ponzi scheme, where government debt or government purchasing is still over 50%, 60% of the economy, and it's all based off of people's retirement funds buying US debt. That's just a circular Ponzi scheme, right?
Agree.
And it's all going to
Wholeheartedly
be
agree with that.
filtered through stable coins and all this other stuff for all these right reasons. But all it is it's going from one Ponzi scheme structure, Fed, financialist, Wall Street, to another Ponzi scheme, which is just straight through the Treasury. Still a Ponzi scheme. Um, give me a second. But as long as the government gets downsized, it isn't taking too large of a cut off of it, it might work, unlike the financialists who just siphon off trillions of dollars a year that never gets reinvested here in the US. So maybe the government Ponzi scheme will work. I don't know. Usually doesn't. Um, yeah, I think, I don't want it to go to gunfire and hot. I don't think any right person in their right mind wants it to. Doesn't mean it's not going to, because the enemy already controls all of our ports of entry. They think they've already won. And they're like New York and everybody else, what do they do? What did they just do in New York City? Well, now they have somebody who will rally up the foreign born people as a fighting force to protect Wall Street physically. And they'll use law enforcement, the DA, and Letitia Brown in New York, and everybody else. They've already demonstrated they are enemies of the people.
Oh, and they are going to stack all of these organizations with
It's already
non-Americans
happening.
that are not
20
loyal.
states, 20 states legally, I think it's 20 states, and a whole lot of municipalities already have statutes that allow foreign-born non-citizens to serve in law enforcement. It's already on the books. It's already happening.
Well, we know that several states have already stacked the deck, including Minnesota and a few others with foreigners in their police forces, including,
Yeah.
there's a few.
So bringing this back to AI and compute and all of this, is that going to help us in this fight? No, the enemy knows. The enemy knows that all this computational, all this, we're over here investing all this money in this super superior surveillance stuff. Meanwhile, they're politically getting into office and putting their people into positions of power everywhere, and bureaucratic influence and power everywhere. Right? That's
Yeah.
one of the downsides. Yes. So
Yeah.
if we can get past this bottleneck, then maybe all that compute stuff will be of immense value. But right now, we're spending several trillion dollars a year investing in all this infrastructure. Meanwhile, the enemy's just taking all of our land, all of our key infrastructure, all of our key positions, all across the country. It's even here in Idaho, right? Even in northern Idaho, where there is jack all except natural resources. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And hydropower, a lot of hydropower.
Well, how much of that have they cannibalized over the last,
Yeah,
because you get,
well, on purpose to make us dependent on Washington and Oregon and et cetera, so states
yeah.
that they control. So, you know, and I'm terribly sorry, guys, I'm gonna have to run here, but um, I believe I personally think humans need to go up an eigenvalue. And I don't mean that in a spirituality kind of way. Maybe that's true too. And maybe the spirituality people are feeling it and sensing it too, and they're communicating it in their language. But I think we as a species are going to have to become vastly more sophisticated and vastly more integrated with the tools and resources that are being built out, which very much, Steve, to your point, are not economically, financially feasible right now. But it's an infrastructure, when we built out the nation's highways in the 1950s, the freeways, most of that wasn't, you know, all the economic growth that occurred across the whole country and not just on the coast that made that paid back many times over the freeway expense. That didn't happen until decades later,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, but we're going to have to get through this bottleneck. And the bottleneck is, and I think this very seriously, I think the resentfuls, the financialists, the communists, whatever you want to call them, the Praetorians really, I think they feel threatened, genuinely threatened because they know humanity, you know, I look at my younger brother who's just turned 38, and I look at my daughter who just turned 17, and they are orders of magnitude in order more broadly knowledgeable and intelligent than we were at our age because they've been connected, all this information flows, they've been iterating, they've been seeing all the simulations of things to try and not. And my daughter and her friends are more socially aware, more inured to manipulation and all that than I was till I was in my 40s. They're still in their teens.
I would say yes and no. I would agree and disagree with that. Because I think they're a little more checked in when it comes to the political landscape, when it comes to the information landscape, but they're checked out in the sense of they look at their future. They don't have the same optimism over their future that we did, right? Because they've, you
I
see where
don't,
I'm going with that?
yeah, no, I agree, Stephen, but I don't because I'm watching it in them. I've watched in just the last 2 years that transition. And now they're actually most of my daughter's friends, and we're from a fairly good family, and we're not rich by any means, but she wants to go to school somewhere. We'll figure it out and make it work. And she could do that. And some of her friends have that same opportunity, and some of them are just brilliant, so they're gonna, pretty much free ride. Um, Give me a second. What I've noticed in the last 2 years is that, yes, 2 years ago, even a little over a year ago, they were despondent about that future. But now they're looking at the trades. They're all doing like trades, planning on going to trade school. They're going into police department, fire departments, and other things. And once they made that transition, their whole personality and persona changed because they know they have a future and they don't care about chasing, being rich and all that stuff. I don't hear that ever out of any of them. Like the shit we talked about when we were age. I'm gonna go be a rich guy one day and all that. I don't hear that out of them. They know that there's this whole transition of from the boomers and the older Xers, and there's all these jobs available that in doing real stuff that machines can't do and won't do, and they're happy about it.
Yeah, they want to be builders.
They want to
That's,
be builders.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
I see a lot more of that too.
I think that Gen Z is the artist generation, right? In the Strauss and Howe model,
Yeah.
right? So I think they're, what is that? The equivalent to the silent generation, right? I think it's the silence. The ones, silent, we all give shit to the boomers. And yeah, some of it's earned and deserved, but the people who actually built the world that we're living in are not the boomers. It was the silence. The boomers just fucked it up.
Yeah.
Maximized, etc.
Generation of mine. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
I look at my nephews, and my nephews are, they're early 30s, and they're looking, how do I buy a house? How do I
Yeah.
expand my career? But the other thing they're looking towards too is how do I work for myself and
Yeah.
get out of corporate
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
America
Yeah.
and build
Yeah.
something that doesn't rely on somebody else's bank account
Yeah.
to grow, right? And I think that's a good transition too, because I think we're going to see, and I think a lot of people are moving to the trades for the simple reason that they don't see a future in tech. Tech used to be like the bellwether of like Hollywood. You go to Hollywood as a writer, you could guarantee six figures and you could work
If
and
you
live
got
pretty
it.
comfortably. Yeah, if you got the right break, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now those opportunities aren't there and they don't see the future in tech. So they're moving towards, you know, I'll go do a trade and do
Yeah.
it on my own, build my own business, build my own client list, and get off of the payroll of somebody else. Yeah, there's definitely a transition, but they don't have the same outlook on the future that we did, right?
Well, we were retarded.
Well,
Look what the hell happened for the future we thought was going to. Where are we now? We're old
you know
men are
what?
probably going to have to go out in gun battles.
Yeah, but you know what? I hate to say this because I got chastised for it when I was a lieutenant.
Mm.
But I remember being asked by general officer as a lieutenant during one of the SAC on-site inspections. They bring their whole entourage out and climb
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
ass
Yeah.
of a
Yeah. Yeah.
microscope and look to see if you polish the underside of a fucking lawnmower and all that stupid shit. But this general officer, he asked me, are you looking forward to retirement? I looked at him and said, General, by the time I get ready to retire, there's not going to be any money left in the bank to be able to do that. I mean, we're spending money like binging alcoholics on weapon systems that we're never going to use in combat. And I said, look at how much money we spend on ICBMs. We haven't modernized the force in how many years? We still don't have a reliable missile. We still don't, I mean, they still have fucking plated wire memory in the Minuteman missiles. I mean, that shit was built in the 50s and 60s. And, he's like, well, I don't agree with your assessment where, America's always going to be on top. Like, you can't operate that way. I said, and by the way, if things keep progressing with political correctness, we'll be in a civil war before I even retire. And, you know, here we
Yeah.
are 20 some years later, and
Well,
we're still on the verge of that. So who knows if it's going to happen. But, I just see if we want to get out of these problems, and especially with this color revolution, things are going to go to gunfire before that happens.
I don't know if it goes hot guns, maybe, maybe. Um, the war is already waging. The Civil War is already raging, but excuse me, it's raging within each of us already, and we are fighting back through the machine, through social media, through internet, through communications, and we've only finally realized that we're at war and that this is a war and we're fighting it out through the machine. And maybe we'll be able to keep most of it there with, some hot spillage like Charlie Kirk and in Butler, Pennsylvania, and others. There's been quite a number of others killed that we don't know, we barely hear the names of, etc. Um, maybe it stays there. Maybe we virtualized, so the 1600s virtualized warfare from the battlefields of Europe into economics and finance, where 80%, 90% of warfare went up into business and global business and finance. We virtualized most of the warfare we'd been fighting before. Maybe what's happening now is that we've virtualized even more of warfare. And, maybe what's happening in Ukraine and Russia is, once for those who know, and that when the truth comes out of how many Ukrainians per how many Russians have been killed, 10 to 1, 20 to 1 before it's all over. Um, that's a startling, shocking thing that, maybe the war is already metastasized into ourselves, into the machine, and we're already locked in all out hot civil war. We just don't reflect it, we don't recognize it as such because it's not the classical guns on guns. It's, you know, I spend all day, every day, like you guys, trying to figure things out about what's going on and how do we counter this and how do we counter that. I'm more exhausted than I was in combat.
Absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
more taxed and
Freaking
more, and that's not, and I'm just one person. This is everybody I know, every one of you, and virtually every single person. So I suspect the hot civil war is already raging
I would agree with that. It's great. It's raging on the information space, right?
within us. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Across the information space within each of us, and we need to recognize it that way that we're already in the hot civil war, and our bodies, every cell in our body is already maxed out in conflict and fight. Right? That's what fifth generation warfare really is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's a good way to put it. I've been saying that, for the last 3 years, we're not in a kinetic war, we're in an information war. And at some point it will go kinetic, but right now it's
Maybe
an
or
information space.
parts. Yeah. I don't think it's it might go kinetic. And if it does, I think it's going to be over key strategic resources like ports, right? Like
Oh,
retaking. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's twofold, right? I think let's just play devil's advocate for a second. And the short answer is if they crash the economy and try and turn Trump into Hoover, you're going to see politicians get smoked. I don't care what you will, because there's so much animus towards the political class right now, which the reality is they're all just puppets, right?
Yeah. They're theater kids.
Yeah, they're just
They're
being
theater
controlled by
kids.
somebody else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
for the layman on the street that doesn't have anybody else to blame, when they can't feed their kids, they can't pay for gas, they're going to want somebody to blame, and that's going to be the political class. And that's where I see it going kinetic, at least initially.
Possibly.
Ports, I would agree with, but that's later on down the road when people realize how bad we've been infiltrated and how bad that we've been sold
Well,
out
I
by.
think it goes the other way. I think it's the ports and other things as the attempt to gain control over this, the 80% of the country that's internal is turned up by control of import exports through the ports and key materials, resources, et cetera. And we realize we have to retake the port cities and towns. And we're not going to be able to do it with elections because they've rigged the elections such that there's no way to do it any other way.
Oh, it's obscene
Right.
how much fraud has been laced into
Yeah.
and institutionalized.
Yeah.
I
All right,
mean,
guys, I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to have to run here. And I know,
yeah, me
Steve, you
too.
got,
We're
yeah,
actually yeah, I'm actually a minute over. So,
appreciate it, gentlemen.
yeah.
I don't know why I do these episodes. I get so wound up. I'm just listening. I'm like, fuck.
Well,
I don't know why I do these. I'm like, this is gonna be fun. And an hour later, I'm like, Christ Almighty.
well, if I can give you a little piece though from gunfights, right? When you're in a gunfight, it's pretty peaceful. You're
Yeah,
in a gunfight and you do what you got to do.
yeah.
And it's the anticipation of the
It
gunfight
drives you.
that's
Yeah.
exhausting. And so what we need to realize, and it just really came clear, and I appreciate this, guys, because it helped me a lot. Genuinely, this conversation is we are already in a hot civil war and it is raging within ourselves. It's raging through the information space, and we are the computational resources that are being fought over. And once we can realize that, then what do we do, Tommy, to what you just said? We can accept we're not waiting for a gunfight. We're in the gunfight. And now I can relax and I can just lean into it.
Just do the thing.
Just do
Yeah.
the thing. Shoot, move, and uh,
Shoot, move, and communicate.
shoot, move, and communicate. But for social media, it's even better. I'm up. He sees me. I'm down.
I'm up. Excuse me. I'm down. Fair enough. With that, we'll wrap it up. For everybody listen, I'll upload this. It'll be on YouTube in a little bit. Go into the description, find their Twitters, all that good shit, podcasts and writing and whatever. Figure it out. I'll text it to you guys. But guys, thank you both for doing this on short notice. I appreciate it
Yeah.
as always, and look forward to the next one.
Yep.
Appreciate it,
Hopefully
guys.
my
All
Thank
right,
you.
camera won't
guys.
be retarded. Take care.
All right,
Yeah.
Steve.
Bye.
EM.
Bye.
Everybody have a good